Alright, I have some really interesting information to add to the last two videos that I made about Mongolia being Gog Magog. And that's written in their historical record. I'm going to tell you something today in this video that might shock you. We talked about in my last two videos about Russia building this supergiant pipeline to China through Mongolia. And I told you that Mongolia is Gog Magog, and that's in the historical record. But Russia has this Gazprom, that's one of their largest liquefied natural gas companies. So you're probably thinking at some point, how is Russia going to connect with Israel with the Leviathan liquefied natural gas field? And how is that going to come about, and how is that going to be part of the Gog-Magog invasion? But what I just discovered is that Russia has already made deals with Israel on a natural gas field that is called Tamar. And it was discovered not too long before the larger Leviathan natural gas field. In my last couple of videos about this, I talked extensively about the company Gazprom, which is Russia's energy giant. So I just found this out and discovered this from a Reuters March 22nd, 2012 article in financialpost.com. And the natural gas field Tamar is the other natural gas field before Leviathan in Israel. So this article I want to read to you, and this is going to be very surprising to you that there's already deals that have taken place with Israel, between Russia and Israel. Tamar gas deal would boost Gazprom's Asia LNG share. Now, LNG stands for liquefied natural gas. Russian energy giant Gazprom was in talks to buy millions of tons of liquefied natural gas, and it said a year, from a huge new field offshore Israel, which could strengthen its hand in the booming Asian liquefied natural gas market. This says Tel Aviv/London. Russian energy giant Gazprom was in talks to buy millions of tons of liquefied natural gas from their new offshore liquefied natural gas field that was Tamar. The partners in the Tamar field said on Thursday, and that was back in 2012, all of this happened, they had signed a letter of intent to begin non-exclusive and non-binding talks with Gazprom Marketing and Trading Switzerland for the annual sale of 2 million to 3 million tons of LNG over 15 to 20 years starting in 2017. The price would be based on the liquefied natural gas prices in Asia or another agreed upon price mechanism, the partners said. Gazprom declined to comment, but one of the company's major goals was to grab a greater share of Asia's liquefied natural gas market, especially after talks to supply China with pipeline gas had stalled. Now, this is really good to find this out after what's taking place now with the new Soyuz-Vostok pipeline that they are taking from Russia through Mongolia into China. But it goes on to say the Russian gas export monopoly so far relies largely on sales to Europe of gas pumped through its vast pipeline network. But it is a relatively small player in the Asian market for LNG. And of course, that would be the pipeline to Germany that supplies the gas to Europe. Access to Mediterranean liquefied natural gas would greatly enhance Gazprom's market position. So, of course, the Leviathan and Tamar fields are right there on the coast of Israel in the Mediterranean Sea. So, them getting access to that from Russia would enhance their huge giant market position. Up to 60 million tons of new annual capacity to produce liquefied natural gas was under consideration in Russia, but for now, just one plant is operating, the Gazprom-led Sakhalin-2 liquefied natural gas project, which produces about 10 million tons per year. Gazprom faces stiff competition in the global LNG market from Qatar, the world's largest producer, as well as Australia, which may overtake the Middle East country as the top producer by 2020. Okay, so production from 2016 was hoped. It said in November of last year, which in this article would be 2011, South Korea's Daewoo Shipbuilding and Marine Engineering Company agreed with field partners Noble Energy, Israel's Delek Group, and Israel Negev to develop Tamar via floating production, storage, and offloading, which is FPSO vessels. Daewoo had said it aimed to produce liquefied natural gas from the field, the world's largest offshore find, in 2009, with reserves estimated at 9.1 trillion cubic feet of gas, starting at the end of 2016 if all the processes for the final deal remained on track. Clell finance analyst Yaron Zer said the negotiations with Gazprom were a positive development for Tamar. Finding a buyer for the gas will increase Daewoo's motivation, that's South Korea, to establish a floating liquid natural gas terminal, Zer said, adding that a finalized deal with Daewoo would add $1 billion a year in sales for Tamar that was starting in 2017. Work on Tamar would be split, he said, with the Tamar partners producing the gas, Daewoo liquefying it, and Russian Gazprom marketing the liquefied natural gas. So they've already partnered with Israel with this Tamar field. The Tamar partners said that any exports of LNG would not affect planned supply from the field to the Israeli market, which was expected to begin in 2013. Now, they said that Texas-based Noble said the Tamar partners signed a 15-year gas sales agreement with state-owned utility Israel Electric Corporation. Noble estimated total revenue of up to $23 billion for the 15-year period agreement. Israel's Delek and Noble, Texas-based, are also partners in the Leviathan gas field, which is nearly twice as big as Tamar and was expected to be online in 2017, which it was. The Tel Aviv Oil and Gas Index was up 0.8% in afternoon trading, and that was by Thomson Reuters 2012. So you have Texas connected to the Israeli gas field, and you have Gazprom, Russia's giant liquefied natural gas company, already partnered to be the marketing end of Israel's liquefied natural gas fields. So there you have Russia, through Gazprom Corporation, sending the oil through this new pipeline through Mongolia, the Gog-Magog region, which includes part of Korea and part of Russia, part of Ukraine, and of course Mongolia itself. And the cities in Ukraine that Volodymyr Zelensky grew up in, they are Mongolian cities. So if you were thinking that we have to wait until somehow those two things connect, Russia and Israel's liquefied natural gas fields, it's already taken place, it's already happened, they're already connected, and they're already producing this liquefied natural gas, and now Russia is getting this gas to China. Since our president immediately shut down our natural gas pipeline, and he and his son Hunter were over in Ukraine, don't you think there was something going on that they knew about with these natural gas fields that Russia is exporting into China through Mongolia? Don't you think that all of this is planned? So let's read a little bit more in another article here from mondovision.com. The Tamar LNG field eases Israel's prices. It says, Israel's huge Tamar offshore field began supplying much-needed natural gas to the country's domestic market. That was on April 1st of that year. It is expected to be the sole source of gas for the domestic market at least until 2015, and consumers were already looking forward to lower fuel bills. Initial volumes from the Tamar field were at 1 billion cubic feet a day. And according to partner Delek Group, production at the field, which is some 90 kilometers west of Haifa, off Israel's northern Mediterranean coast, will peak in 2016 at 11.88 billion cubic meters. Now, the Leviathan field is off the coast of Haifa, and they found that much larger source of the liquefied natural gas, or the natural gas field. I guess they have to liquefy it through this process. And it was expected to coincide with the beginning of the production of the even larger Leviathan field. The Tamar Consortium, comprised of Noble Energy out of Texas and its Israeli partners Delek Drilling, Avner Oil and Gas, Isramco, and Elan Gas Exploration, has signed 11 supply agreements with local customers with a commitment to supply up to 170 BCM of gas over the next 15 years. So I'll put these articles in the description box in case you want to check them out further. They go a lot deeper and have a lot of pages of information. Now this might surprise you that in Newsweek.com, they reported on August 3rd, 2021, that Russia and China see eye to eye on approach to end the Israeli-Palestinian fighting. Russia and China have expressed a convergence in their views towards adopting the best approach to prevent fighting between Israelis and Palestinians as the two partnered powers seek a greater stake in the long-running Middle East conflict. And of course, this is all very prophetic. It says, Russian Foreign Ministry Special Representative for Middle East Settlement Vladimir Safronkov and Chinese Special Envoy for the Middle East Zai Jun shared a telephone call on Tuesday in which they asserted they have similar views on the current situation in the zone of the Palestinian-Israeli crisis, according to the Russian side. They reiterated the importance of building up international assistance in the interests of improving the humanitarian situation on the Palestinian territories, the statement added. In this context, they noted the necessity of creating favorable conditions for the resumption of a direct negotiating process between the parties, which will make it possible to avoid recurrences of military confrontation and stabilize the regional situation in general. The two sides also agreed to continue to closely coordinate efforts in the Middle East direction of foreign policy, which fully corresponds to the spirit of strategic partnership between the Russian Federation and the People's Republic of China. The conversation was the latest in a series of bilateral affirmations of the growing ties between Moscow and Beijing, who last month, and it was in 2021, celebrated the 20th anniversary of their good neighborliness and friendly cooperation treaty that has now been extended. This month they took forward to their fourth consecutive annual strategic exercises together, which for the first time took place in China, one of many joint military drills to come. On the policy level, the two major powers were also looking to find common ground and have begun coordinating on various issues, including the embattled Iran nuclear deal, a worsening conflict in Afghanistan, and a dire humanitarian situation in Syria. Most recently, they're looking for new solutions to the seemingly intractable Israel-Palestinian conflict. So right there, those two are connecting not only with these pipelines of the natural gas, not only with Israel and China and Mongolia and, going through Europe, they're shutting that pipeline down, and they're connected to Israel. Despite being at odds for much of the Cold War, Moscow and Beijing both have a long history of backing Palestinian movements, claiming territories held by Israel. Today, Russia and China both have robust ties with Israel while retaining good relations with the Palestinian leadership in the West Bank. The United States, which has traditionally been at the center of past Israeli-Palestinian peace efforts, has an unwavering alliance with Israel and far more troubled ties with the Palestinian side. This dynamic deteriorated significantly under former U.S. President Donald Trump, who aligned his administration closely with Israel, going as far as to recognize Jerusalem as its capital in defiance of an international consensus regarding the sacred city as disputed. His successor, President Joe Biden, has made inroads to repair the U.S. relationship with Palestinians and has sought regional support from fellow Arab states in doing so. This effort was tested in May after an explosive 11-day war erupted between Israeli forces and Palestinian factions led by the Hamas movement in the Gaza Strip. The conflict ended with a ceasefire brokered by Egypt with U.S. support, but occasional Israeli airstrikes have continued in the weeks since in response to allegations of incendiary balloons being released from the Palestinian enclave. Now, all of this stuff already happened, so the post-truce strikes were conducted even amid a change of government in Israel, as longtime Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was succeeded by his former defense chief, Naftali Bennett. The Biden administration has sought to engage its new Israeli counterpart on a range of issues, especially including Iran and the Palestinian issue. Also on Tuesday, Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman met with Israeli National Security Advisor designate Eyal Hulata and Senior Foreign Policy Advisor Shimrit Meir to discuss the U.S.-Israel bilateral relationship. They discussed Israel's security, strategic challenges including Iran, and the need to take steps related to the Palestinian people that are critical to advancing freedom and security and prosperity for all, a State Department readout said. So there you have it. China and Russia are trying to figure out how they can broker peace between the Palestinians and Israel, and they're on the Palestinian side. So this is all very interesting prophetically. I'm going to skip down in the article to save time. It says, seeing an opportunity to capitalize on the current dissatisfaction among Palestinians, Russia has intensified its efforts to unify the fragmented political landscape among them with an underlying goal of establishing direct talks with Israeli officials. It said last week, that was in 2021, Russian presidential envoy for the Middle East and African countries and Deputy Foreign Minister Mikhail Bogdanov discussed Moscow's role via telephone with Palestinian National Initiative co-founder Mustafa Barghouti. The sides discussed the current situation on Palestinian territories with a focus on the task of the restoration of Palestinian national unity on the political platform of the Palestinian Liberation Organization as a major condition for establishing a sustainable Palestinian-Israeli negotiating process on the generally recognized basis of international law, a Russian foreign minister readout said. The two were also said to have acknowledged the importance of the Middle East Quartet, which includes both Russia and the U.S., along with the European Union and the United Nations, and the need for direct talks between the Palestinians and Israelis geared towards settling the conflict on the basis of their so-called two-state solution, which envisages the establishment of an independent Palestinian state within the 67 borders coexisting with Israel in peace and security. 2 days earlier, Chinese permanent representative to the UN, Geng Shuang, weighed in on the conflict during an open debate held at the Security Council. Geng said that despite the truce having held for 2 months, the situation in the occupied so-called Palestinian territories remains unstable. He expressed concern regarding unilateral actions by Israel, including the demolition and confiscation of Palestinian homes, an issue that has prompted tepid frustration even from the United States. This is what he said from China. Israel must earnestly comply with relevant UN resolutions, stop demolishing Palestinian homes and evicting Palestinian inhabitants, discontinue its settlement expansion, put an end to the violence, threats, and provocations towards the Muslims, and effectively maintain and respect the historical status quo of the holy sites in Jerusalem. What a complete farce that is, because Israel, of course, is the one that has the historical record in Jerusalem. Not this so-called Palestinian people that aren't even Palestinian. You know, they come from Arab countries. He then referred to a 3-part plan, this Chinese person, put forth earlier in July by Foreign Minister Wang Yi during the 4th Palestinian-Israel Peace Symposium held by China via virtual link. The first point entailed greater powers for the Palestinian National Authority, whose rule has devolved since a 2007 split between the ruling West Bank-based Fatah and Gaza-based Hamas. The initiative also involves supporting greater unity among the Palestinian factions and encouraging a resumption of direct negotiations between Israelis and Palestinians in points that echoed those of Russia. Wang would reiterate this formula days later during a trip to Egypt, the second stop in a journey that also included Syria and Algeria. Lasting peace cannot be achieved without justice being its foundation, Wang said. The establishment of an independent Palestinian state should not be delayed indefinitely, and the legitimate and lawful rights of the Arab people should not be ignored for long. The two-state solution is the only realistic path to resolving the Palestinian question. Well, and my response to that is, why not let Arabia take these people in that are of Arabian descent? That sounds more like a solution. All parties concerned with the Palestinian question and the international community should make practical efforts to promote the two-state solution on the basis of UN resolutions, and to encourage the realization of the third point of the Chinese framework for peace. Wang said that Palestinian and Israeli negotiators are welcome to conduct direct talks to China, the dragon, I might add, In the meanwhile, he added, China calls for the holding of an international peace conference led by the UN with the participation of the permanent members of the UN Security Council and all stakeholders in the Middle East peace process to seek a comprehensive, lasting, and just settlement of the Palestinian question and to enable Palestine and Israel to coexist in peace. But on the ground, tensions continue to simmer. Renewed by unrest erupted once again in Jerusalem. So now you not only have the natural gas deals going on between Russia, China, Israel, and Mongolia, Gog Magog, and you have this Gazprom that signed a deal to market Israel's Tamar liquefied natural gas project. And this article was written in 2013, and I can't see this whole article, but it's from WSJ.com, but it says Moscow, OAO Gazprom has signed a deal to market liquefied natural gas from the Israeli Tamar floating project in Israel. The Russian gas company said Tuesday. Gazprom Marketing and Trading Switzerland signed an agreement for exclusive offtake from the Tamar project for 20 years with Levant LNG Marketing. Now, this was written in spglobal.com, May 21st of 2021, that the U.S. company Chevron instructed to restart operations at Tamar gas platform offshore Israel. London. U.S. major Chevron has been instructed by the Israeli Energy Ministry to restart operations at the Tamar gas platform offshore Israel, a company spokeswoman said May 21st, following the ceasefire agreement that happened between Israel and Hamas. While Tamar was closed, Chevron continued production from its other Israeli offshore asset, the larger Leviathan field. The Tamar platform is located closer to Gaza than Leviathan, whose platform is further north offshore Israel, close to the port of Haifa. It was not the first time that the Tamar platform, which is thought to be within the range of Palestinian rockets, had been shut in because of conflicts in the region. In May of 2019, Israel decided to halt gas supplies from the platform after an increase in cross-border fighting between Palestinian militants and Israeli soldiers that lasted for 3 days. Before that, in 2014, Hamas said its armed wing targeted the Noah offshore gas installation in a rocket attack. Though Israel said no gas target had been hit, Noah had already ceased production in 2013 after Tamar started up. Chevron operates Tamar with a 25% stake. That's the U.S. Its partners are Israel's Delek Drilling, 22%, Isramco, 28.75%, Tamar Petroleum, 16.75%, Door Gas, 4%, and Everest at 3.5%. Gas is produced by 5 production wells further offshore and flows through 2 140-kilometer pipelines to the primary and main processing facility on the Tamar platform, where most of the gas processing takes place. Gas is then transmitted from the platform through a pipeline to an onshore terminal in Ashdod and into the Israeli market through the INGL National Gas Pipeline. Some Tamar gas is also exported to Jordan and Egypt. Now, this was written January 24, 2022, posted by the New York Post.com. Team Biden seeks to stop yet another pipeline, even as gas prices rise. This was written January 24th of 2022. So this was before this sudden price hike this past week. If you needed any more proof that the anti-American, pro-Russian, pro-Iran, pro-China, anti-Israel wing of the Democrat Party has captured the White House flag last week, we learned Team Biden plans to put the kibosh on a natural gas pipeline with U.S. involvement that would reduce Europe's dependence on Russian energy. The Eastern Mediterranean gas pipeline, which would carry Israeli and Cyprus natural gas, is yet another energy resource serving America's strategic interests that the Biden White House wants gone. East Med joins a long list that started on day one with the Keystone Pipeline, a ban on oil and gas leases on public lands, and the October federal court ruling that ended drilling in the National Petroleum Reserve in Alaska. All these actions, demanded by climate change alarmists, have reversed America's long-sought energy independence, won at a great political cost by President Donald Trump. They have not only made us dependent once again on foreign oil, they have sent oil prices skyrocketing, enriching America's adversaries in Russia and Iran. My friends, there's a word for this, and it's called treason. When you're aiding and abetting the enemy, that is a treasonous offense. The Trump administration backed the $7 billion East Med pipeline, a project of Israel, Cyprus, and Greece, well before it was signed in January of 2020. The 1,200-mile-long pipeline was to bring 10 billion cubic meters of natural gas from Israel's Leviathan and Tamar offshore to Europe, offsetting supplies that otherwise would come from Russia. Plans called for doubling capacity in future years. U.S. oil major Chevron is the main operator of the Israeli gas fields. And thanks to the Abraham Accords that opened trade and diplomatic relations between Israel and four of its Arab neighbors, the United Arab Emirates bought a 22% stake in the Tamar field from Israeli interests in May. So there you have the UAE having a, what did I say here? A 22% stake in the Tamar field. But Turkish President Erdogan sought to undermine the deal from the start. His foreign ministry called it the latest instance of futile steps aiming to exclude Turkey and the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus from the region. Any project disregarding Turkey cannot succeed. Erdogan sent warships and deep-sea exploration vehicles to put teeth into that threat, conducting military patrols in disputed waters between Greece and Turkey. In December of 2019, he signed an agreement with the disputed government in Tripoli, Libya, that created a maritime corridor between Turkey and Libya that essentially cut off Israel from any access to Europe. So Erdogan's flexed his muscles at both Israel and Cyprus, and Team Biden's move is to reward him. Traitor, traitor, traitor. The State Department sent his newly minted advisor for global energy security, Amos Hochstein, to Israel in November to give a heads up on the administration's plans to ditch support for the pipeline. And this month, it quietly sent a non-paper to the government of Greece, which leaked to the Greek and Turkish press, warning that the pipeline posed a security threat to the region. The U.S. Embassy in Athens finally clarified the American position. We remain committed to physically interconnecting East Med energy to Europe, its statement read, but are shifting our focus to electricity interconnectors that can support both gas and renewable energy sources. Funny, the president didn't have a problem giving waivers to Russia's non-green pipeline to Europe, Nord Stream 2. Erdogan crowed out loud. If Israeli gas will be brought to Europe, it can only be done through Turkey, he told journalists, saying Israeli President Isaac Herzog could visit us in Turkey to discuss the pipeline. America's relationship with Turkey soured mightily during the final Trump years when it booted Turkey from the F-35 program because Ankara was buying Russian S-300 and 400 missile defense systems and could not provide guarantees it would not share sensitive U.S. technology with the Kremlin. While Erdogan revels in throwing his weight around, he's also desperate to get back in America's good graces, meeting with Biden at the G20 summit in Rome in October in an attempt to patch things up. And Biden? His woke national security and foreign policy B team seem more eager to subsidize electric cars for the rich than to provide cheap oil and gas to the American middle class or to deter America's adversaries. And that, my friend, is an act of distinct and deliberate treason and very anti-American policies meant to destroy the American and just our way of life. And this is very diabolical. Let me tell you this one last thing about the natural gas. Israel's Delek, this is written in the jpost.com. Delek sells its share in Tamar gas field to Abu Dhabi for $1.1 billion. This was published April 26th of 2021 by Zev Stube. The deal is believed to be the largest and most significant commercial agreement between Israel and the United Arab Emirates since the establishment of diplomatic relations. Delek Drilling has signed a memorandum of understanding to sell its 22% share in the offshore Tamar natural gas field to Abu Dhabi's Mubadala Petroleum Company for $1.1 billion. So Israel sold its 22% share in its own drilling to the UAE. The deal is believed to be the largest and most significant commercial agreement between Israel and the UAE since the establishment of diplomatic relations between the two countries last August. Delek was required to sell all of its rights to the Tamar field by the end of 2021 as part of a government plan drafted in 2015 to regulate and decentralize the structure of the local natural gas market. The deal includes $1 billion paid up front and $100 million to be paid upon the completion of certain conditions, Delek said in a press release. This gas has replaced coal as Israel's primary electricity production resource and has played a significant role in reducing Israel's carbon emissions over the past decade. So now you know right there in that sentence that that is why they're doing this, to reduce the climate change carbon emissions. And that's why all these people are desperados to do all these pipelines and, you know, to get away from coal production into this liquefied natural gas production. I did the video about Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine and how he grew up in these places, a large Mongolian city. And I talked about how historically Gog and Magog are the Mongolian people and they're descended from Magog. Of course, Gog is supposed to be a chief or a leader from that group of people. So let me give you this news brief from jns.org. Zelensky to address Israeli Knesset in coming days. Now, this is something that's just now going to happen in future days here. Zelensky to address Israeli Knesset in coming days. So this is coming up. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has spoken to lawmakers in the United Kingdom and European Union, where he has received standing ovations in the attempt to rally the world to help Ukraine. This was written March 10th, 2022. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is expected to address the full Israeli Knesset in the next few days. Knesset Speaker Miki Levy spoke with Ukrainian Ambassador to Israel, Yevgen Kornichuk, on Thursday when he reiterated his invitation to Zelensky to address the Knesset via video call. The Ukrainian ambassador promised to forward Speaker Levy's response, and they agreed to schedule a date for President Zelensky's address via Zoom in the coming days, according to a readout of the call. The confirmation comes after some reported drama over the invitation. The Ukrainian president had first asked to address the full Knesset. However, Levy told Zelensky that the Knesset, which had just finished its winter season, would be going on recess and that the building had been scheduled for renovation. Instead, Zelensky was offered a Zoom chat with a smaller number of Israeli lawmakers, which the president reportedly declined. Nevertheless, the readout from the call between Kornichuk and Levy appeared to downplay any drama over the invitation. The ambassador thanked Speaker Levy for his welcoming response to his letter and for publicly clarifying and refuting the false information published in the press that allegedly argued that the speaker had refused President Zelensky's request to address members of the Knesset. Zelensky has spoken to lawmakers in the United Kingdom and European Union, where he has received standing ovations as part of his attempt to rally the world to support Ukraine, which it just said up above. And one more thing, you know, Zelensky from Ukraine, he's Jewish, and it's really interesting to me that he's really pushing for Naftali Bennett to try to broker some sort of peace between Russia and Ukraine, and putting Israel right in the middle. So knowing that all of these gas pipelines between Israel, Russia, China, and all of this is going on, it's very interesting to me that he's really pushing to speak at the Knesset and how it's going to bring Israel into the midst of all of it, even though they've already connected through the liquefied natural gas. So I just wanted to state that. So basically you can see the writing on the wall that Russia has already connected to Israel and the Tamar field, and probably now the Leviathan field, I would presume. They are setting up this scenario for the last days to get rid of our regular way of life so they can have the world reset to the way that they want it. And I just hope that this is all opening your eyes to see that we don't have to wait for the future for Russia to get involved with the Leviathan, Tamar, natural gas platforms out there. They've already done it. They've already made agreements. They're already in it together. So it's all set up and ready to go. And whatever's going to set these sparks off that's going to cause the Gog-Magog invasion, that includes all these other different countries, and some of these pipelines go through, like there's a pipeline that goes through the Kazakhstan, that corridor where all of those nations are, Tajikistan, all of these places along there. There's pipelines that go there. So it's very interesting how it's all setting up. I just hope I'm giving you information that's very important and opening your eyes to see how this is all leading to the end time scenario written in the Bible, and Ezekiel 38 and 39 particularly, when that event happens. But we know with all of these events taking place that, we're all looking for the Lord appearing, the glorious, blessed hope that we've been waiting for. So anyway, I hope this gives you some more insight. And if you haven't seen the prior video to this one and the one before that, I encourage you to watch those. The one talks about Vladimir Zelensky. It talks about Gog, Magog, Mongolia, and that whole revelation and just how it's all coming together. All of that is just bringing prophecy to an incredible point that's going to lead to the return of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. So, my advice is give your life to the Savior who redeemed you to take you back into the eternal Garden of Eden-like state, and He reverses the curse of death off of this earth that was brought forth by Adam and Eve, and through His covenant of His blood on the cross as the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world, we are redeemed back to God. And if you believe in His covenant with His blood, He has taken you as part of His bride, and when He appears, He will take you in the glory cloud to be where He is. And before all of this tribulation comes, we pray that we're taken up and out of here. But until that happens, we're still living our lives. We still have to survive. We still have to do what we have to do and be a witness for the Lord on this earth. And that's what I'm trying to do. And I hope this gives you a lot more information and opens your eyes to see that it's far more developed than we ever knew. So anyway, with that, I'll sign out for tonight, and I'll probably have this video up sometime on Saturday. So I will talk to you later. So I hope you found this information very informative, in addition to the previous videos that I just did about Zelensky and Gog, Magog, and Mongolia, and Russia doing the pipeline to China through Mongolia, and now connecting that Russia has already connected to the Israeli Tamar field, and more than likely the Leviathan field, so since it's a bigger one. So anyway, that is very important information. I needed to get this out to you, and I pray you will continue to support my channel and my work, and I pray God blesses it and shows me where to go and where to live and where to be and how to continue this. And thank you for watching, and I will sign out for tonight. God bless you. Good night.